Welcome back. There was a time when Palestine, despite the Israeli military occupation, had a media scene that was among the most free and vibrant in the Arab world. However, today, with the power struggle between Fatah and Hamas, many of those very same TV, radio stations, and newspapers are choosing sides in the battle over who will speak for the people of the West Bank and Gaza. The Listening Post's Salah Qadar now on the journalism that is fanning the flames of conflict in Palestine.
When Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip last summer, the fighting that we saw on our television screens was not restricted to the ground. A media war just as vicious was raging with serious consequences.
If the question of war means can we speak openly, then there certainly has been a media war going on.
There has been a parallel media warfare going on, and this has taken the shape of television programs and propaganda clips that each side is using to bolster their position in the conflict.
The local Palestinian media is as divided as the parties themselves and have tended to focus on issues pertaining to each party's individual loyalties. The feeling of the need to absolve certain individuals in either party or even the party itself of certain accusations has driven the media war.
Media organisations that are without political affiliation, such as the Palestine News Network, are subject to pressure from both sides.
We are discouraged in the West Bank from reporting on the events of Hamas. Just as in the Gaza Strip, the journalists are discouraged from reporting on the events of Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. People are very, very party affiliated, and it has gotten worse and has gotten more difficult. To be a neutral reporter right now is incredibly difficult.
One of the best examples is a new Hamas television cartoon that really depicts the takeover of Gaza by Hamas last summer. In this cartoon, we see that the rats of Fatah are receiving crates of weapons marked with the American flag. In the end, of course, the Hamas have had too much. They've had enough. The roaring lion of the resistance pounces on these rats, gets rid of them, and cleans up Gaza, and there's a bright new future and a new day ahead for Gaza.
The Palestinian media has taken some sides based on the political affiliation of each journalist, sometimes out of necessity for their own safety, and sometimes because of the political affiliation of the publication or the owner of the publication or station that they work for. A large part of this has been going on for a long time. It's not new. It's not just because of the recent Fatah-Hamas split.
9 months on, and the media situation inside the Palestinian territories has not improved. As the international media continue reporting from outside the territories, is their agenda being dominated by the view from Jerusalem and Washington?
Well, Hamas has often used violence to advance its cause.
In the West, Hamas is seen as a terrorist organization that's not to be talked to, and oftentimes that's the case in the Western media. Hamas members really are kind of a rare occurrence on a lot of the media channels, and there isn't really a lot of in-depth reporting there.
For sure, the international media have played a part in this media war. And I think, first of all, for most Western media, Hamas are seen as the bad guys in this story. Mostly because Hamas is an Islamist organization listed as a terrorist organization in Europe and in the United States, and Western media reflect that.
A lot of reporting a lot of the reports that are filed from the region come from Jerusalem. So you'll have a reporter in Jerusalem talking about events happening in Gaza, talking about events happening in the West Bank, or even in other countries like Lebanon, for example, when they're really so far away. So obviously, being so far away from the conflict, it's going to influence the reporters, and they're going to be also having access to the Israeli point of view more often than actually being on the ground in the area.
A point often made by the Arab media. This documentary on Al Hiwar Television, a London-based pan-Arab channel, goes even further to suggest that the bulk of Western media coverage of the so-called Hamas coup against Fatah was pure propaganda.
The international media has done what it always does. It takes the side of the United States. The United States has certainly taken the side of the Palestinian Authority against the Hamas government, who was elected and then, of course, ousted. The day that the Hamas government won the Palestinian Legislative Council elections, the United States imposed sanctions on the Palestinian people for electing them and openly threatened any bank who dealt with them in any financial transfers. And people weren't paid for months and months and months. And when people stopped being able to buy bread for their children, they started to believe the hype, the international hype, and did start to blame Hamas. So the international media actually had a lot more of an effect on the internal political situation than the local media did, because the international media pushed so hard that the problem was Hamas, because that's what the United States continued to say.
The international community today condemned Israel for shutting down crossings in and out of Gaza.
The Israeli media, which has had a virtual blackout on Gaza since November of 2006, recently accused the Al Jazeera satellite network of slanted coverage in favour of the Palestinians, in particular over the network's coverage of the most recent military escalation. 3 Israelis and more than 120 Palestinians were killed, including dozens of civilians, before the fighting finally subsided at the end of last month.
Today it's very clear that this divide between Fatah media and Hamas media is still there in the Palestinian territories. Of course, since the last weeks or the last months, with the Israeli military offensive in Gaza, the attention have switched to the Israeli-Hamas conflict more than the internal Palestinian conflict. But the divide is still there.
The result is a distorted, mediated perception of Gaza, and inevitably the normalization of an otherwise abnormally criminal situation.
I don't believe that our local media has truly made a difference either way in the Hamas or Fatah split. It really hasn't affected what people think. It doesn't seem that anyone has been swayed based on a Hamas-run newspaper as opposed to a Fatah-run newspaper. And most people are well aware of who's with whom politically. There's a lot of self-censorship that's going on, and that's part of that media war.
More Global Village voices now in the war of words over the West Bank and Gaza.
To watch Hamas journalists slant the stories to make Fatah look bad so that their political organization will look good in their media is terrible. And just as tragic is to watch Fatah journalists who are supporting the Fatah organization slamming Hamas and undermining the image of Hamas just to make Fatah look good is a tragedy, not just in journalism, but for Palestinians. Both sides are doing harm to the cause, and they should stop it. It's not an easy thing to do, though. Israel dominates the region.
Well, what I saw on Palestinian television is they always bring that there's a number of people has been killed by Hamas militias, and that there's always fighting, and that the Fatah is like the innocent party, when in fact there's both death on both sides, but only the media, or the Palestinian media, and sometimes the Western media, they always focus on the death of people who are siding or are part of Fatah party.
The bias against Hamas is the fact that it has always talked about Hamas as an Islamic party. It's always talked about in a vein of Islamophobia, which I think shows an inherent bias, not simply against Hamas and Palestinians, but also against Muslims across the world.
Finally, in the era of old media, a politician caught in a lie, the way Hillary Clinton was over her Bosnian adventure, could just ride out the story and then hope that everyone in the mainstream media would just forget about it. However, times and media have changed. Senator Clinton's whopper over imaginary snipers and brave dashes across the Tuzla airport tarmac lives on the World Wide Web. We're leaving you, as always, with our internet video of the week. This one comes courtesy of an American website called barelypolitical.com. We'll see you next time at the Listening Post.
I remember landing under sniper fire. There was supposed to be some kind of a greeting ceremony at the airport, but instead we just ran with our heads down to get into the vehicles to get to our base.
Hillary Clinton made a dramatic entrance into war-torn Bosnia today as she piloted her jumbo jet to a safe landing. Unfortunately for Mrs. Clinton, some of the hardest fighting the human race has ever seen was currently raging, with routine nuclear attacks on both sides. Top generals agree there's no place more dangerous and snipery than Bosnia right now. Our noble and brave First Lady took time away from dodging attacks to shake hands and smile, and yes, even show off a little marksmanship on a terrorist hiding under a tank. One of the most dramatic moments came as the H-bomb, a nickname given to her on this trip, was hugging a young girl. Sniper fire struck two men standing nearby, leaving them shaken and impressed by Mrs. Clinton's calm composure under fire.